Jason, you were at the game. I was watching on TV, so I got an Aflac trivia question for you, and I don't necessarily expect you to comment on this just because we've talked about it ad nauseum, but I thought it was kind of apropos and it was kind of interesting that they throw out this trivia question. So, what four schools, if I got this right, it's either one of these two versions. What four schools in the country either do not have a transfer player? I didn't know if it's stated on the roster or in the starting lineup. I forget which it was. I think it was the entire roster. Does that sound accurate for Clemson? So Clemson was one of them.
I know which four didn't take a transfer last year. The
Okay,
service
maybe.
academies in Clemson.
Okay, well, you got it. You hit the answer because the play-by-play guy at some point caught on to it, and I thought, oh, that's the exact route because I
From
thought.
my understanding, and I've not seen it yet, even when I go back and watch the replays sometimes because I fast forward through some parts of it, but there's a graphic they show every week about Clemson and Dabo not taking any transfers. I've said many times that I think Clemson made a mistake not going and getting the end out of the portal. But outside of that, there's enough talent on this roster that they don't have to look the way they looked the other night. That they should be able to compete and beat this Louisville team because that if you just stack up the roster side by side, Clemson's got more talent, just more sheer talent. But it sure didn't look that way the other night. And when for a long time, Dabo Swinney's, he's been very good at knowing which buttons to push at the right time to get these guys up. Those guys were not up for that game the other night. You could almost see it when they was running down the hill. That there was very little juice. There was very little juice on the sidelines compared to some of the other games I've been at this year. I don't know. It was odd. It was weird. And the fact that they've lost 3 in a row. Or 3 years in a row coming off a bye week, it's just even more. It's even weirder. I don't know what they do. I don't think they do anything that much different during the week off. I think they get an extra day or two off, but other than that, the preparation is probably about the same. But it is definitely, something going on over there with those guys coming out of bye week. Something definitely was off this weekend because that looked like an entirely different team from what we've seen in the last 6 weeks. And I get it. The competition, I get it. The teams ain't been that good and all that. But there's not an argument to be made that offense hadn't been much improved despite who you're playing when you compare it to last year before last, because they weren't doing that to teams they weren't doing that to bad teams the last 3 years. It's just, I don't know what went on over there the past 2 weeks. I got a good idea what's going on in there today and the rest of this week. It's probably scorched earth Dabo walking around in there, but there might be some coaches in there that are coaching for their jobs over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and again, Louisville is a decent team, but they also struggled to beat Virginia and Boston College very late in both of those games. So this is not a great football team.
They got a really good offense. That offense is really good. Make no mistake, Absolutely. That quarterback's really good. They didn't even have to throw it around much the other night. I mean, they were just – it's not like they just went out there and beat Clemson in a track meet. They just ran it down their throats. And if you're on that Clemson coaching staff or in the administration, or if you're a Clemson fan or whatever, that's something you're going to look at as unacceptable. Clemson, I don't even think they rank inside the top 100 in rush defense right now after that game. And I don't think anybody in the country would have even ventured to guess Clemson would rank nearly that bad in rush defense. And yeah, the backup skewed some of the numbers some. That's absolutely true, and I'll listen to that. But there weren't many backups playing Saturday night outside of, at the end behind Peter Woods. It was pretty much all starters, and they still got it stuffed down their throat.
Now it's a trip to Virginia Tech. The Hokies had an 18-point lead last weekend and blew that against Syracuse. But to make a slight excuse for them, they did not have Tyrone Drones, their starting quarterback. Colin Schlee was backing him up and played a decent game. And they also didn't have their top tailback, Bashul Tutin, who's number 5 in the nation in rushing. So don't know if those guys are going to be back. But a trip for Clemson to Lane Stadium, which is kind of uncommon. Of course, we talked about this last week where because of the divisions, obviously Clemson and Virginia Tech only played once every 6 or 7 years. And so only one of those every other would be at Lane Stadium. So tough trip to Blacksburg to take on Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch all of it. I got to watch at that Virginia Tech Syracuse game. I didn't watch all of it. But even their backup quarterback went down in that game. I don't know if he ever came back in, but he did go out. But fully expect the starter back this week. Don't know if he's 100% healthy, but I would fully expect him back. You're going to find out a lot about what this Clemson team's made of this week. You know, you got road game this week, road game next week. Not an easy venue to go up and win in there in Blacksburg, especially the crowd's pretty rowdy. Tends to be pretty rowdy when Clemson comes to town. I'm very interested to see, I mentioned a minute ago about Dabo knowing which buttons to push. I am very interested to see what buttons get pushed this week and how motivated this team is. Because, pretty much all your goals are gone. Going into that game against Louisville, you got ACC championship aspirations. You got making it to the playoff or back to the playoff aspirations. Those things are out. You don't really have any of that left to play for. I mean, unless some absolute chaos goes on in front of you in the ACC standings, which I don't see any way that's going to happen. So you got to do something to get this team up and motivate them to bounce back and finish. We're going to see a lot about what some of these guys are made of. It was, I don't know the right word to use right off the top of my head, but it was watching Cade Klubnik in his post game Saturday night. It was different. I've never seen him like that, man. You could tell, you could almost tell the blood was boiling in his veins. He was so upset. He wouldn't even look at you. He's just looking straight ahead with like a dead look in his eyes. And he's usually very personable, and he'll look you right in the eye when he's talking to you. Spoke for about 3 minutes, and he's gone. So we're going to see what some of these guys are made of this week, because these are a couple. You got three big games left over the next 4 weeks, and whether you got a trip to Charlotte on the line or not, you at least got to play for pride. You got to play for the name on the jersey and the logo on the helmet. We'll see what happens.
Jason Priester, the Clemson Insider. Please join Jason right there. And on your way out, please hit the like button for us here at the Voice of College Football. Jason, we appreciate it. Enjoy that trip to Blacksburg.
Yeah, that's my first time going up there. I've never been there. It's one of the few I've not been to in ACC. I've been looking forward to this for a while.